tell us other ways you help people go through, like process something. So is it, like you said, one of the examples is like maybe you express what needed to be expressed at the time. Or maybe another example might be maybe see it from a different perspective. I guess like what are the ways that you think could help people process their past?
From a body perspective, the body goes into shutdown responses in fairly predictable and patterned ways across humans. Okay. And this isn't just with trauma. I mean, it's also with, let's say we get in a conflict or an argument, which a lot of people, of course, we're humans. We get in conflicts and arguments, especially with close family members. It's the holiday time, so buckle up, folks, So intense things happen. And when intense things happen, whether it's traumatic or not, the body starts to shut down in fairly predictable and patterned ways. Okay. One of the most common things to happen is that the limbs shut off from our awareness. Okay. So what you'll notice when things start to get intense, and it doesn't matter what intensity, it could be conflict, it could be as you build towards orgasm, it could be a traumatic event, the body will start to shut off the awareness of its limbs. Okay, so what your feet start to get numb and unavailable to consciousness. Your hands start to become a little bit disorganized. I mean, imagine being in the middle of an argument and then trying to sew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like good luck with that one, right? You're going to be poking yourself in the finger, right? And it's because the limbs are starting to shut off a bit. So one of the things to think about is, you got to get the body moving.
I see.
And that's one of the things that often happens, of course, in therapy, but in so many different situations, the legs shut off in particular. So we got to get those legs moving. Okay. So get out and stomp. Okay. Or go to a kickboxing class. Okay. Or get those arms moving in creative ways. Okay. Even art, the expressive arts and arts are very powerful for healing, so that's one really common thing, is that the limbs shut off. And another really common thing is that we just stop breathing. I mean, obviously not literally stop breathing,
Yeah.
but the capacity of our lungs and our diaphragm to have expansive breaths goes down and down and down and down when stress compresses. It makes us scrunch and squeeze and squint. Okay. So, and a primary place for that is, of course, in the diaphragm and the breathing mechanism. So breath is a very powerful tool for change. Very powerful tool. And what you'll notice when things get intense is that your breathing will start getting compressed. So you work on getting a little bit more awareness about your breathing flows and your breathing rhythms, so that you can then change that tendency to scrunch and to squint when things get intense.
Totally. You also mentioned like how there's so many artistic modalities or even physical things like dance or yoga or drama therapy that can help us process trauma. Talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to bring into your imagination, listeners, for those of you who are listening to this, bring into your imagination children that are at play, children that are playing. Okay. Children that are immersed in play have access to a type of emotional intensity, spontaneity, imagination, and they play big, right? You be the dragon and I'll be the unicorn. Okay. And there's an expansiveness to it. There's a beauty to it. There's so much energy and vitality, right? And then, as we get, kind of scrunched into our seats in the educational system and stuff like that, we have to sit like this. Often one of the consequences, of course, is that we that we lose the capacity to express the intensities inside of us. And so they pop out in weird ways in conflict and, in relationship, or, they have to go somewhere.
Yeah.
So this is one of the beauties of drama therapy and the expressive arts, is it really makes a space for the inner child, if we want to call it that. So that it's not popping out. These intensities aren't popping out in non-creative ways. So, I mean, in a way, I think that's a simple way of looking at it. It's making a space for the inner child, but it's more than just about the child. It's making a space for the great intensities that often take us over and grab this steering wheel in the direction of bad stuff. So drama therapy gives a space for it to kind of play itself out creatively on the dramatic healing stage, so that it's less likely to cause trouble elsewhere in life.
Yeah, totally. When you say intensity, do you just mean like the emotions that come with life, right? Like, because a lot of people have these emotions, but it's not maybe acceptable, or it's not like, you don't want to outburst on someone. People need an outlet somewhere, somehow.
An outlet, exactly, like a pressure release valve.
Yes.
So the expressive arts are exactly that. I think it's a great way to think about it. It's a pressure release valve, because there's so many rules of engagement, and there's so many optics, and there's so many, so many ways to get canceled, and so many ways to F up these days, that we need a place to just let loose. And some people turn to sports for that, and that, and other places that, because sports are intense, right?
Yeah.
But that's just, usually a lot of times sports is that you're just watching it out there, or like in the case of watching a movie, you're watching the movie or the show out there. And in some ways you kind of get to run some of the juice of the intensity, of the emotional intensity. It's certainly activating your brain as such, but it doesn't get the body involved in the actual intensity. In sports, yes, a bit, but it's not, but sports have limitations. They don't make much room for real spontaneity of the type that children really do. The real imaginative, creative stuff. Sure, there's going to be some pressure release valve stuff. Great, go do it. Go do the sports, bring that aggression out. And that aggression, it can be creative, because it's like, everybody's challenging each other to do better and stuff. But insofar as, being an optimal human in the creative sense, then we need to actually actively exercise creativity, the creative expression of emotion, and do it consciously, and do it in an environment that's fun and deep.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of that, right? Environments that are playful, deep, intense, and safe. You know what I mean? Deep being one of the things that is left out of sports, right? It's not particularly philosophical or something like that. It's not really integrated with the deep stuff of meaning that exists in being a human, right? It's just kind of trying to win.
Yeah. And does this matter whether you're doing this creative expression yourself or with a group? Because drama therapy is that it's social, right? With others. I would imagine, like for me, my creative outlets are like singing, like belting songs in my car is a great release, or like dance is a big part of my life. Does the social element matter though?
Let's talk about a couple of principles from trauma resolution therapy. One of them is, you can't really heal a relational trauma, okay, by yourself, okay? You can't really meditate yourself out of a relational trauma. Only so far that you can get on your own before you need to be in the environment that originally hurt you. But you can get far.
Yeah.
You can get far. So I grew up in Minnesota, and there wasn't, at least in my family system, there wasn't much room for doing anything other than play football, and sure, we had fun, and I had a loving family system and everything, but there wasn't much space for creative self-expression. Like boys and the early 80s or whatever, when I grew up in Minnesota, weren't like encouraged to go to a dance class, or
Yep.
go to a poetry event. I mean, not where I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
So it was actually really healing for me when I found dance, and I just danced by myself for quite some time. And there was a tremendous amount of healing for me in that, because I thawed out. I had Minnesota freeze. It's not just Minnesota, right? It's the freeze of all these rules that are put upon boys, differently than the rules that are put upon girls, of like the limitations of what my body should and shouldn't do. It definitely shouldn't cry, and it shouldn't do playfulness like a kid, really, unless you've had 12 beers. That's fine. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
there's that weird kind of sensibility that you hear it out in culture a fair bit. Like, oh, I don't dance unless I've had, 6 beers or whatever it is. So I thawed out on my own a lot. And the next stage then for me was to meet the next threshold, which is then to go back into into a social milieu, social situation that brought all this stuff up for me about being in the optics.
Yep. Yeah, you had to heal that.
It's part of the healing. Back into this kind of optical space of surveillance, because this is one of the things, right, that we're put upon. Like, just the surveillance apparatus. We're being looked at. We're being evaluated. We're being judged. And to bring now my capacity to dance, which I've learned to do on my own and express myself, and then feel that, and a whole nother layer, because it's like, oh boy, here we go. And then,
Yeah, I
another
understand.
decade of going through that. And
Yeah, I think you can do so much healing by yourself, but then when you put it in practice in the real world, there's more, like, it continues, right? Kind of like a people pleaser continuing to stand up for themselves and set boundaries. It's like you have to take the action, and that's part of the healing as well.
yeah. And that's why a somatic framework is really useful, because it's like, we get into these habits, and habits are hard to change. They really are. And these habits exist as neural networks in the brain. So we have to have a practicing space. So that's why I'm so committed to, when a person leaves my office, they got to have stuff to do. Why? Because we actually have to change neural pathways, and that takes work.
Yeah. It's like you can't just expect to be healed just thinking about it. You have to actually live it.
Yeah.